I'm here today with leadership coach and speaker Zena Everrett, who's the author of Mind Flip, Take the Fear Out of Your Career, and The Crazy Busy Cure, which won the Work and Life category at the Business Book Awards this year. Originally a recruitment entrepreneur, Zena sold her business in 2007. Then she studied an MSc in career management and coaching. She then took further postgraduate qualifications in psychological coaching and leadership with neuroscience. And she's coached on the Executive MBA programme at Oxford University's Said Business School. And she's a member of the Associate Faculty at Henley Business School. So first of all, welcome, Zena. Lovely to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
And secondly, congratulations on winning the award. How cool is that?
Oh, I'm thrilled. Thank you. Although, I was preparing for this and thinking, I should do some sort of female imposter syndrome like little old me. Whereas I have to tell you, I was gutted I didn't win the whole thing. So I said, I was saying to people, I only won best in class, not best in show. And because I'm a crazy perfectionist, and I don't know if this rings any bell, but we don't want to be perfect. We just think nothing we ever do is good enough. So it kind of bit me, went home thinking, I'm going to get some chocolate on the way home to cheer me up. Thinking,
because I failed here. Isn't it amazing how we can take the most amazing success and turn it right around?
I thought, I was at the end thinking, yeah.
I'm ready.
This time, and it went to somebody else. Very well deserved. Anyway.
I had Patrick Dunn on the podcast last year, who he wasn't so much in that situation, but his mum apparently was furious that he didn't win the overall award and only won in category, which is hilarious. But there you go. Yeah, way to alienate of all your fellow shortlisted authors, of course.
Well, I hope she wrote a letter.
I'm sure she did. Strongly worded letter. Tell us about the night, though. How is it? I mean, let's not talk about so much about when they didn't call your name at the end, but what about when they did call your name for the category?
It was great fun, and I had published my book during lockdown, so I hadn't actually met my publishers. So it was really great to meet the people that were so helpful, and to all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was a really, really good night. I met some lovely people. It was great fun, and it was fun. It was fantastic, actually. I'm delighted, really pleased.
And now you're over the sort of disappointment of not winning. Nobody can take the whole kind of award-winning author thing away from you. So that's nice, isn't it?
I know. And it was a proper award, because when I was nominated, some of my friends said, "Oh, right, well, how do we vote?" And I was saying, no, it's not one of those things where I get it's not like getting your.
You can't game it. No, you
can't game it. Exactly. This is genuine. So what was your question?
That was it, really. Just wanted to celebrate with you for a moment, because it was marvellous. But let's talk about the book itself, because I have to say the whole crazy busy thing resonates with me rather more than I care to admit. So where did the idea for the book come from you?
So I'm a coach, like you said, and I would say to my clients something sort of nauseatingly coachy, like, how's that laser focus we agreed in the last session? And they'd say, yeah, look, I don't do any of that. I'm just playing whack-a-mole all day because everybody wants a piece of me. And at about 4:00, I think, right, what was I worrying about at 4 a.m. that I wanted to get done today, and why haven't I done it? And they just kept saying this over and over again. And I thought, gosh, it's got to be, you can tick all the boxes, but actually it's what we pay attention to that makes the difference. And then I realized that, obviously we bring our own kind of perfectionism and tendency to procrastinate that go together, and all that kind of stuff, and our people pleasing. But actually there are big systemic problems. And I think we have a crushing culture of overwork. And I realized that there are these theories about productivity and organizational drag, where essentially organizations get bloated with excessive collaboration, excessive complexity, that just slow the whole workflow down. And it's a real, real problem. So I wrote the book for people that are squeezed with all these demands on their time, and they go to work to do a really good job. Actually, a lot of what they do is fairly meaningless. Nobody goes to work to do meaningless work. But, you think about the amount of toing and froing that we have these days to get anything set up, how digitization has layered another layer of kind of crazy busy work on top of the real work. And it's fantastic in so many ways. But equally, I mean, how many times have you not been able to get into a document because you can't work the blooming thing, or you've got the wrong version, or someone hasn't sent the password. And, just the hassles, the toing and froing to set things up, because everybody uses their phone for everything apart from phoning each other. And there's all the multitasking that goes on, how we're switching from one thing to another because we've got teams and, the continuous interruptions. So I really got fascinated by this. And I wanted to kind of write a book that was pacey and easy to read, because I read, and you'll know this better than me, that I read somewhere that people don't often get to the end of a business book, do they? I don't know how far do they guess? Is it 2/3?
If that, yes. I remember talking to somebody who had a platform of ebooks, and they were looking at the business books, and the completion rate was one of the lowest, but the satisfaction rate was one of the highest, interestingly.
Well, maybe they get the message early on, actually.
That's
That
it.
could be it. But I thought, no, I really want to write a book that is actually pacey and fun to read, like feels like an entertaining read, that actually helps people. And so the award means a lot because it makes me feel like actually a writer. So I put that at the start of the LinkedIn profile. It's my second book, but it took me. But actually, reviews mean a huge amount, don't they? When somebody gives you a nice review, and a few people have said, "I've read this twice," or "I read it and then I downloaded it," and then you think, "Okay, right, I'm really pleased with that."
That is great. And I quite often encourage people actually say, if somebody were to leave a review, your dream review, what would they be saying? Because that can really help focus your mind on what impact you want to make, which is useful. But there is a kind of paradox baked into this, isn't it? You want to write a book for people who are kind of too busy to read a book. So it's interesting that you took that angle on it. I must say as well, and I know I shared this with you earlier, when you have a lovely sort of list of diagnostic list at the top, you do, and at the very last item is, did you skim this list like you skim everything? And I was like, get out of my head.
Yeah.
So I paid attention after that and I sat up.
Yeah. I do these crazy busy sessions in organizations, and I often say to people, if you had an extra hour, what would you do?
So it's really interesting you asked that, actually, because we had this as a session at the virtual campfire that we run every week the other day. And we were all going, oh, and if I had an hour, can you imagine I'd do this and this? And face that kind of inescapable, wait a minute, why am I not just doing this? Why am I doing all the other stuff and not doing this, which I have just identified as being super important?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I know. And many people just say, actually, the basics: sleep, exercise,
Oh,
go for a
interesting.
walk, and read a book. And, these are things kind of right in our DNA. That's all the crazy busyness. They're not, they're not wild demands on our time. So, and I feel that people are working longer and longer hours. They're cannibalizing into their own personal time. And what we know, all the research tells us, is that people are getting their work done, but they've got this continuous low level of anxiety because they're not actually dropping into deep flow work and thinking that we have when we write, because that feels wonderful. But we're switching all the time from one thing to another.
And it's interesting what you were saying about the hoops that we kind of put up for ourselves as well, because I think one of the issues with work in the 21st century is that so much of it is, in a sense, the stuff we really want to get done is invisible, and the stuff that we end up spending our time doing is visible, and people can see that we're responding to them.
Yeah.
And there's almost a bit of guilt involved in doing the stuff that nobody can see that you're working. Thinking looks so much like staring out the window sometimes, and there's a sort of cultural, there was an issue with that, isn't there, in the workplace?
Yeah, well, there is, but actually most of us are knowledge workers who are paid to think. I wrote my book for people who work in offices, so they spend the majority of their time on admin, but they should be spending it on strategy. But most of the tasks that we do take minutes. A lot of the stuff we do takes about 5 minutes if you time it. But where the real value comes in is when we're thinking. We're looking out the window and thinking, what's going to derail me? How do I punch above my weight? Where do I add the most value? Who's got the problems? Who should I be checking up on? What's my gut telling me? All this kind of stuff. We're not. We're just responding to emails. 300 billion emails are sent every single day around the world.
They're all coming into my inbox, I think.
Yeah, everyone says that. Most of them come to me. But then they say, oh, thanks very much for that. And they go, no, thank you.
And that sense of one part of the value of coaching, I always think, is not so much anything that you particularly bring to it. It's just that you create the space for people to actually do that type of thinking, isn't it?
Yeah, you do, because there isn't enough time to think. because we're crazy busy. But it's a default thing, isn't it? And I think we're, if we have an empty day at the weekend, I think now we're hardwired to think, oh, right, well, I'll do this and I'll do that. I mean, we're not used to a patch of time because, we default to fill it. And that's what technology is for. It's very easy just to fill our time, not to actually go and think. So
I'm interested. Do you take your own advice? Do you catch yourself doing any of the things that you warn people against in your book?
really unfair question.
I know, but just make us feel better.
I can faff around. What I've realised is that I've got to go somewhere to different places to do different things.
Yeah.
So if I'm at the place where I just send emails and faff and do invoicing and all that kind of stuff, then I find it really difficult to do some deep work. And yes, I can really faff. My big guilty pleasure, I've come off Facebook, as I think I mentioned in the book, which I'd like to say is because of the damage it does to global parliamentary democracy, but just I was wasting too much time stalking exes on there. But I can waste time on Instagram, and I don't go on LinkedIn so much anymore because it's just so full of nonsense. But you have to, don't you? I'm freelance. I've got to put the odd thing on there. But I'm not liking and sharing a lot. But I can really lose time on Instagram. And the research tells us, but like most research, our grannies could have told us that when we have a message on our phone, somebody WhatsApps you, you stop what you're doing, but you do two other things before you go back to the piece of work that you're doing. Because the phones, I'm pointing at mine because of course it's here. Look, it shouldn't be switched off, but it's here. I have got most of my notifications off it though. But we do two other things before we go back to what we should be doing, because the technology, those bright tech minds, are just keeping us on their apps all day. And there's so many compelling news feeds and things. So I do know if my phone is being charged up in a different room, that makes a big difference. Even, and they say you can have a reduction in cognitive capacity even by having your phone next to you, regardless of whether it's switched off or you're looking at it. I mean, think about that effect on our teenagers. That is quite frightening.
It is. It's absolutely terrifying. I think as well, though, there's a sort of external dimension. There's how we manage all this stuff, and particularly the technology, which you go into in some really practical tips in the book about, stuff we kind of know, but there's some really useful strategies there about prioritizing and, blocking things out. And then there's also, I think, an internal thing, which is almost that we are, I know maybe this is just me, I sometimes go looking for distractions because I'm scared of the big work in front of me. Yeah. And so, how Coleridge had his person from Porlock that came along and interrupted in the middle of Kubla Khan. I remember Stevie Smith's poem, I'm desperate for the person for Porlock. I look at him as a friend, where are you? Come on, interrupt me. This is really hard. And I think there is an element of that as well, is that it's easy for us to go looking for distractions up against the discomfort of uncertainty, of hard work, of not knowing the right answer.
Yeah. So how do you get around that?
Oh, that's a really unfair question. Touché. Well, my phone actually is charging in another room, which is more to do with the fact that it needed charging than anything, I'll be honest. And I block out my mornings. My mornings are my nobody else time. So I do some free write. I do my run, I do my free write, and I do a quick what's ahead of me, kind of, what do I need to get done if nothing else today, kind of thing. So my mornings are good. After that, it all goes downhill very badly, but at least the mornings are good.
Yeah, that's probably when your mind is sharpest, is it? I think for many of us.
Absolutely. If it's not done by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it ain't going to get done. Or if it's going to get done, it's going to be really poor.
Yeah. But I think those of us in corporate life, though, really struggle because they have so many meetings. I mean, I've got clients that literally just ping from one meeting to another. And then they have no time. They look at their notes and they think, well, when am I actually supposed to do the work in the meetings?
Yeah, I don't miss that about corporate life, I've got to say.
No, there's this real pervasive meeting culture. And it makes me laugh because, if you remember when you were in that world and you'd send someone to a meeting instead, they'd have to sit in a room for a couple of hours. And then when you said, okay, well, what happened to that meeting? They'd brief you in about 2 minutes, wouldn't they? Tops. Oh, yeah. Well, this. You think, right, okay. Thank goodness. But what I find is that the managers, particularly that I work with, they spend their life in meetings. So they say that was pointless. I don't know why I was there. So they'll waste all that time, but they haven't got 10 minutes to say, how's it going, Alison? Everything all right? I love the
Yeah.
way you did that. What's working well? What's on your mind? They don't have time for any of the really important stuff. They just waste these great tasks of time. So when I work with businesses, I make them they, they hate me, but I make them limit the amount of hours people can spend in meetings in a week. And I make them say, right, if we're launching a new project, we have to replace meetings. We're not adding to your meeting schedule. You've got to take one off. And that to make them really think about it because, and to also make them run their meetings much more effectively. And
Yeah.
there are so many ways now. I mean, you don't need to all sit in a meeting room. If something's just an FYI, that can be sent as a voice note. You don't need to get people all to stop work at the same time.
And they
We
don't
just,
have to be set to start and end on the hour either. I mean, what's that
no,
all about?
they don't. No, but we've got to get over, and it's guilt, like you mentioned. I think this whole idea that we need to work synchronously with other people. Well, we don't actually. When do you ever sign up to being available to everybody at all times? So,
Yeah, so true. And
mm,
I could rant about corporate culture and the things that I do that are rubbish about timekeeping and getting more hints from you. And I'm kind of tempted to do that, but I'm not. I'm going to talk to you about writing as well, because people are going to want to know, Zena, how do you write your books? And what do you enjoy? What did you find surprising? What do you find hard? How do you do it?
yeah, okay, go. Well, I was thinking about this, and I like how not to do it. I think actually. So this is my second book. And if I do another one, I'm probably going to be much more structured and map it all out with post-it notes and things and do it properly. But I think that I was just lucky. I had really great editors who just rep and knocked it in shape and moved them both all round and for me. And I was thinking the obvious thing everybody says, don't they? If you want to write, you've got to write. Um, what worked for me, frankly, is taking advantage of kind cafe owners.
This is part of the getting away from where you normally faff around and do your invoicing to write, right?
Yeah, if I go
Mm.
somewhere to do something, then I get into flow.
Yeah.
So, and it can be quite a noisy environment actually. But if I just go somewhere to take my laptop and I think, right, I'm going to write that thing. So I don't necessarily plan in time. I don't think I'm going to write for an hour. I think I'm going to write that piece. So even if it's, one page, that's what I'm going there for. And if I do any more than that, that's a bonus. So I don't put pressure on myself, to make it a chore. It's enjoyable. But the one thing I've realized is that I can spend so much time wiping imaginary smudges off walls and, cleaning windows and things and, hard stuff.
Displacement activity is, I've never been so productive as when I'm not writing,
Yeah,
and madly trying to fill the time that I should be writing with something that I can point to and say, look, I did this.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think that's it. Just going to a cafe, and then when they say, "Shall I heat that coffee up for you?" That's not fair actually, because I often would end up, say, buying a meal I haven't had just because I've used their room. It's a great office, so I haven't completely taken advantage. But that's what I'd say. Go somewhere with your laptop, buy a cup of coffee, and it will come. And don't beat yourself up and actually the journey there, your subconscious brain is ticking it over anyway. So that's where the ideas don't come staring at screen, do they?
No,
It's
and there's,
a better way.
I don't know if you're an extrovert. I'm guessing you probably are.
Well,
I mean, we're always on the spectrum, and there's,
yeah,
there's
yeah,
different, yeah. But I find that the kind of white noise of humans around me is not comforting. That's the wrong
yeah,
word, but it's helpful, oddly.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it is. It depends which humans. If they're saying no, so then that's not
Yeah,
so.
small humans can be less helpful. Yeah. but genteel clinking of crockery and hushed voices, I find that very helpful.
Well, it is interesting, isn't it? Because I think that's the whole idea of getting into flow, which I write about
Mm.
quite in the book.
Mm.
But I think if I go somewhere specifically to do something, that's the only way it really happens. So that's what works for me.
And this is your tip for authors, I'm guessing. This is what you'd say if I was to say, what would you tell a first-time author to do?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm sure everybody that comes on here says, look, if you want to be a writer, then you've got to write.
We have had that a couple of times. I mean, it's
Yeah.
kind of, it's writing 101, isn't it? You ain't going to go anywhere unless you actually get your bum on the seat and start writing.
Yeah. And don't worry about it's much easier to edit than it is to originate. So I think just write, don't worry about it. Just try and get something down. And then you can finesse it to your heart's content. There's also something about that kind of faffing to get ready, isn't there? So when you've got something to do, we spend a lot of time finessing rather than just starting it. But I think equally people say, for any big piece of work, they say, look, I need to start it, but it's so big, I haven't got time to start it. Because you think actually you need to go somewhere for 45 minutes and set a timer if that helps on your phone so you don't miss out on stuff. But actually just go and figure out how to start something. What does it look like? What are the resources you need? Who's done it before? Can you get support? All those kinds of things. So I think that don't put pressure on yourself to start something, but actually some real structured thinking about it. You can do that, and that starts the process going.
That's a great tip almost for any big project, isn't it? That feels overwhelming. It's just almost taking time not to do it, but to think about how you're going to do it. Sort of meta work.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think also like time management 101 is if it's not scheduled, it doesn't happen.
Yes.
So there has to be a plan. Like you say, my mornings, this is what it looks like. And I think we have to be a bit old school and just, not wait for the muse to come because it doesn't. Think, okay, I'm going to do that on these times and be quite disciplined in it. So I'm not even going to tell you my boring routine. Should I just?
Oh yeah, we want to hear your boring routine. It'll make all of us feel better. Go.
A few days a week I do Pilates, and I got I drop my son off and I've got a good 90 minutes before that class. And that's mostly when I wrote my book, in those 90 minutes. And
With a
then I
coffee.
do other bits in between with a couple of coffees. Yeah. And then I do Pilates and I come back and then I think, actually, I better earn a living here. And I try, and it doesn't always work like that. But if I can do that 2 or 3 times a week, then you think, gosh, I'm really winning at life here. But I was very specific, and I wouldn't take other stuff with me
Yeah.
to the cafe. And I'd also check my emails before, but I wouldn't then, I wouldn't try and do something else because then the time just goes.
Yeah.
So I think there has to be some structured and a prompt. So you're removing options. You don't have a choice of things to do. You just got to do it.
Yeah. And it's foundational, isn't it? And it's such a key point because actually you will never have 2 hours of clear time in which to write your book
No,
unless you plan for them. It's never going to happen.
no,
So yeah.
no. But you can get a lot done in 40 minutes. You can get a lot done in half an hour.
Yeah.
I know somebody who's written a really great piece of fiction that's been in the bestsellers. And she used to write a little bit every evening on her phone, which then on Google Docs or something went into a main document. And then that's where she'd write, and then she'd edit it when she had more time. But she made herself write 10, 15 minutes every day, and it's cumulative. And I think we actually underestimate how much editors do. We feel, again, the whole
I don't.
thing. Sorry. But I think, we're not handing over some sort of finished job. You've just got to get something down and they'll find the nuggets, won't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, development editors are an absolute God-given gift, and yeah, absolutely use them. Brilliant. So I always ask my authors, I always ask my guests as well to recommend a business book. Now, obviously, Crazy Be Secure, yes, genuinely everybody should read it. But is there another one that you'd like to recommend for us, or that you found particularly helpful?
Well, look, I also have a color-coded library of books in my office, which is great distraction.
Displacement activity 101.
So I really had to look through them, and actually, one of the authors I recommend a lot is somebody called Alan Weiss, Weiss.
Yeah, been on this podcast, in fact.
Oh, right, okay. He's great, isn't he?
Yeah, he's fantastic.
He doesn't.
Be more Alan was kind of my mantra for weeks and weeks afterwards. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Right. Well, there you go. Okay. I love him. And he very kindly read a proof of my manuscript and gave me he and Marshall Goldsmith gave me endorsements, and Peter Bregman, who I'm really influenced by as well. But I love Alan's work because I went from, I sell my time, and that's really hard because you charge by the hour. That sounds really rude, but you know what I mean? It's not. anything that I'm far too old for and not very good at. And Alan says, don't, why are you selling by time? That is ridiculous. So that he was a big influence on me. So I loved his book, $1 Million Consulting Practice. I so do not have $1 million consulting practice, but nevertheless. And then I also read his book, Money Talks. And it really made me raise my game, actually. And I had, gosh, you're very good at getting me to rant and tell you my deepest,
You're welcome.
deepest embarrassing situations. I let a client really push me down on rates recently. And we all have these great ideas, don't you? But you happen to agree to something because the next month looks a bit quiet, and you think, oh, right, okay. And then sooner or later, of course, there was a load of work. They were really difficult, loads of briefing, loads of change, all the normal stuff, 80-20 real. Like I write the book on this stuff, how this over-servicing is another cause of crazy busyness. Anyway, of course, sure enough, they cancelled about a week before. And which I could have predicted. And I thought, God, Alan Weiss says, be more Alan, doesn't he? He says, if you charge enough, the CEO of the business will be putting the chairs out and making sure there are people there to listen to your talk. So I just thought, gosh, yeah, well, there you go. I need to read it again. And I've read all his books a couple of times. Yeah. So Alan, love him. Doesn't fuff around.
No,
when he
absolutely.
For my book, he said this needs to go on the cover only.
He's brilliant, fantastic. Great. Yeah, it's a great recommendation, and on that, I don't know. Well, let's not get into the whole gender thing, but I do think there is something about how we sell and how he just owns his space and owns his value and doesn't have a problem with it.
Yeah. No, well, as I get a funny age, I think I'm getting my hormones are morphing into Alan. Sure. I mean, my pet bugbear are all these sessions for women on imposter syndrome. You think men don't suffer with imposter syndrome. I think if a client of mine is saying, oh, I'm feeling a bit imposter syndrome, I said, well, that's great. That just shows you're doing something that's new and scary and brilliant. Get on with it. But that's interoception, that fifth sense, telling you really need to prepare for this. So what's wrong with it? But all that fluffy stuff about, oh no, don't do it. It's all a bit like, I get really annoyed with that. Whereas I worked with this women's group yesterday at a university, and I was just saying to them, if you were a man, how would you spend your time? What would you focus on? And they'd be like, oh my God, well, I'd stop doing that straight away and I'd do this. And you think, okay. So yeah, we all need to be more Alan.
That's so interesting, isn't it? We immediately know what we would do if we didn't.
Yeah. And I hate to gender stereotype, but I do get a bit, there are so many of those books, aren't they? Women.
I think that actually men do have imposter syndrome, but I think that's lovely reframing it as what Stephen Pressfield calls it, resistance, doesn't he? It's the sense of discomfort that tells you you're onto something really important.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's great. I wrote in the Crazy Busy Cure, when I was little, I was a brownie in Ireland where I went to school, and they used to say to us, a good brownie would, you do all these jobs, but you mustn't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody, just do it. And, that's the right kind of way to behave. You think, God, what
generations of women have grown up expecting to be noticed and rewarded for work that they don't talk about.
Yeah. I mean, and then you go into work, that's really not going to get you anywhere.
It's not going to get you the raise, is it? It's not going to get you the corner office. No.
It's not going to get you the corner office. And I have this conversation with women who have internalized that message unwittingly, and they don't manage stakeholders. So they're doing these great jobs when they're just hoping somebody notices. And whereas men are much better at getting buy-in, bringing people with them and all those kinds of things, because they don't have those kind of rubbish messages about, being good and being quiet and the rewards will come.
Oh, it's a whole new podcast here. Yeah.
How did we get onto that?
I don't know, but it was very, very high quality stuff. Thank you. But we're going to have to finish it, unfortunately, because I've got an eye on the time. So Zena, if people want to find out more about you, more about Crazy Busy Cure and your other books and the work that you do, where should they go?
Well, I'm all over it. So please connect on LinkedIn. There's my website, zenaeverrett.com. And I do send out one monthly mailer. So if anybody wants to sign up for that on my website, or just email me and I'll add you to MailChimp. That would be great. I'm on Instagram and Twitter, but I don't want to encourage people to go onto social media. So it's not exactly in it, but
Not
yeah,
on brand. Yeah. And it's Zena with a Z, as you always have to explain to the coffee people, right?
ZENA. Yes. Oh, yes, exactly. Oh, don't. Yeah.
Brilliant. Oh, what a joy to talk to you. Thank you so much. I think we've covered so much ground there. It's absolutely brilliant, but thank you.
Pleasure.